What up, crew? Let's check out the Lake District in the north of England. Joe P. Kirchman here, and this last week some friends and I went up to the Windermere Lake District in the UK. It's very picturesque and looks a lot like a Settlers of Catan sheep tile. The Lake District is located up in the northwest of England, almost near Scotland, and it's a beautiful national park. If you've heard of Beatrix Potter, who is sadly not related to Harry Potter, she's instead the writer of, most famously, The Tale of Peter Rabbit. She spent a lot of holidays in this area and left almost all of her property and money to the trust that is this Lake District National Park. We had to cross a couple of the trails that weren't clearly marked, but we made it to the top of some beautiful views. There were a lot of sheep with newly born lambs, but even more than that were the walls that were around. They were all made of dry stone, which means that they were made without any sort of mortar to hold the stones together. It's most popular at the Inca Wall in Cusco, Peru, but let's get back to the UK. Oh, and if you're wondering, yes, I have 3D printed the entire Settlers of Catan set. The color of the rocks and grass really made it look like a part of the game. However, back in town, housemate Hugh decided to give the bumper of the rental car a little test with a rock, and the rock won, but not for long. One idea was to try to take a stick and a rock and give it a little love tap to kind of undent it. But it didn't really work that well because there was only a small gap where you could put the stick in. However, my fingers just fit.
Yes! Yes!
Oh, that's looking good.
Yeah!
Ooh.
What about this part? Here, can you get that out even further? That looks better than That's good. Yeah. We'll take some shoe polish and a hairdryer and
So after that was fixed, we decided to take a little train ride at the Threlkeld Quarry and Mining Museum. It was awesome, especially because we were late and so was the train. It takes you on a tour of the old mine and all of the tractors that have definitely seen better days. The old guys that gave us the tour really loved their jobs and were really interesting and had a lot of useful information, plus some really cool looking facial hair to go along with it. There were a lot of old excavators, and they told us a story that there was one machine in the bottom of a lake for like 40 years that they floated up to the surface, and then were able to clean it up a bit, and it now sits in the main area. They said that a lot of these rocks were great for roads because they had a lot of grip. This is only one of two known locomotives called a Hunslet. It's got 50 horsepower and it sounded awesome. Some people may not see the value in all of these spare parts, but to me, I felt like a kid in a candy store. And talking about candy, there's a real nice chocolate factory in the town over called Kendall. There were also some really neat coves that were dug out inside of the walls that didn't have any signs on them. So we thought there was possibly gold. And then when the guys dropped us off back at the museum, they decided to go for another ride and just went away. So we just wandered around the excavators and then found a little creek that may have had some gemstones in it. Not really the most optimistic names for a creek, but they work.
I got gold!
Now, inside the museum, there were actually some really neat rocks. Now, I'm no geologist, but a lot of these came from this area, and it was fascinating to see actually how many different varieties there were. They don't mine there anymore, but there were some great diagrams and explanations of basically everything that came out of that mine. There were also some interesting old papers about all the rules that they had to follow and the protocol that was required. It was interesting to see how these crystals formed and how different they were from one to another. There were also some really cool fossils, but this one was the biggest. Then there was this dark room showing, I think, what they looked like in UV light. I'm not exactly sure what the bug is about, but it was an interesting effect. Gave it kind of a Halloween feel. But now the most amazing room, in my opinion, was the area where they showed all the blasting equipment. This had an old school drill boring machine that we thought had fake sticks of dynamite. So I decided to recreate my own sound effect from my intro. Happily, nothing worked. I just think that they wanted to use any excuse that they could to blow things up. So my previous job was working in a small outdoor sporting goods store in Portland, Oregon. They're called Ollie Damon's. If you're in the area, definitely go check them out. And so we repaired fishing gear as well as camping equipment, and I got really interested in like old school lanterns. So some of these styles were pretty fascinating to me in that they were actually used in the mines. It also seems very dangerous to have an open flame in an underground mine shaft where things could possibly catch on fire. Kind of makes me thankful for my job above ground, as well as seeing how things have evolved and how things have kind of stayed similar over time. So I'm thinking that they dug their way down into the mines with the excavators, blasted them out with the dynamite, used these wheelbarrows to bring all the material back up to the surface, all to melt them down into some useful products that we use every day. On a side note, I never realized that there were so many different types of railroad tracks, and that the spikes were called dogs because they look like a dog's head. I'll have to do a project with all these items sometime. Let me know if you have any ideas. Anyway, well, I wondered why there were so many tables covered in slate in the Lake District, and I basically found the answer. Sadly, there were not that many tables covered in quartz. And then lastly, I thought it was interesting to see what kind of finish these rocks would have when they were cut. Really cool stuff. Overall, my kind of museum. I want to give a big shout out to the Threlkeld Quarry and Mining Museum. Say that 10 times. And to the Hertz rental car for not charging us extra. Cheers, thank you guys. This weekend, we're gonna be up in Birmingham for the Makers Central Fair. If you're around, please come. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Quote time.
All right. Oh shit.